Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Straight Talk for the Soul series. I'm Carrie Murphy, your host and the creator and founder of this global broadcast and community. Welcome to our listening family, and thank you for the gift of your time and your presence today. If you haven't subscribed to the show yet, it is free. Just go to straighttalkforthesoul.com and you'll get news about upcoming shows, replays, and lots of free gifts. And you can also find us on iTunes. Just type in Straight Talk for the Soul, YouTube and Facebook. In our Facebook group, we would love to see you there. And it's really, really humbling and exciting to see and feel this family of light expanding. And so I really love walking this journey with all of you. As I mention often, I want you to feel like you have a safe space to land each day, a place to feel at home, and a place to feel supported. So thank you for contributing your light to this sacred circle. I want to ask my favorite question today. What is the best that could happen? What is the best that could happen as a result of being here with me and Gene Ang today? I want you to set an intention, if inspired to do so, for the greatest expansion, healing, activation, the greatest openings for your heart. You can even place your hand on your heart and just breathe and open to receive everything you're intended to receive today. And just give yourself the gift of opening your heart and lightening up with us today. Again, Gene Ang is back with me. I always enjoy my time with Gene. He was trained as a neurobiologist from Yale, and he's now a conduit for the Arcturian consciousness. And he has a very loyal following due to the tremendous authenticity and power and effectiveness of his healing capacities. So he has a following that I hope to support him in expanding each time he comes back on the show. So I'm honored to share his light with all of you joining us today. And if you've joined us by phone, you can press *2 to raise your hand. A little bit later, we are going to take live callers. If you have a healing request of Gene, he's going to be channeling some of the Arcturian frequencies that will benefit not only the caller that we select, but the entire audience. So stay tuned for that. And I'll be looking in the webcast as well if you have questions and comments that you want to send us there. And so our topic for today is the Arcturian 5 elements, healing frequencies, healing the planet, healing ourselves. We're going to talk about why the Arcturians are helping us and how we can work with them, how an understanding of the 5 elements, earth, water, fire, air, and space, help to keep us balanced and healthy. We'll talk about how the inner elements in ourselves are reflected and affects the outer elements in the world and the environment. We'll talk about practices to keep ourselves healthy and young. And Gene will also be providing some transmissions. He will channel for the group 2 of the 5 elements. And so we'll experience the Arcturian earth element healing frequency and the Arcturian fire element healing frequency. The first is going to be for grounding the body and the mind, and the second frequency for energizing the body and the mind. And so a little bit more about Gene, and then we'll get started. Gene Ang has a healing practice based in Thousand Oaks, California. He sees clients for a number of energy healing and shamanic healing practices. He currently facilitates and teaches a healing method that he created called the Arcturian Healing Method. In addition, he teaches seminars that focus on the integration of science, spirituality, and healing. Gene travels both in the U.S. and internationally, facilitating healing sessions and workshops. Gene received his BA from Stanford in human biology and philosophy and religious studies, and he was formally trained as a neurobiologist at Yale, followed by a post-doctoral fellowship there as well. And after that postdoctoral fellowship, Gene decided to step into the role of a facilitator of healing to help people. Most of his work centers around the use of subtle energy to help align the subtle energy body, its channels, its meridians and energy centers to help restore balance and harmony so that healing can occur, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual. Gene doesn't see himself as the healer, but simply as part of the interconnectedness that occurs when facilitator, client, and source love God interact to bring healing forth. And he sees his teaching engagements and seminars as an extension of this interaction that occurs on multiple dimensions to bring wholeness, understanding, and evolution to all involved. So I'm excited that he's back. So please join me in extending waves of love and light and appreciation to Gene as I welcome him to the show. So Gene, welcome back.
Hey, Carrie. Oh, it's great to be back and great to hear your voice and connect with the community that you created here.
Oh, I'm so glad you're back. We always get so many people who just follow you wherever you go. You have a steady group that just is so connected with you, Gene, and I love to see it expanding. So let's talk a little bit about you for those who might be new to you, Gene. As I mentioned, you were trained beautifully on the 3D science level as a neurobiologist at Yale, but now you're this conduit for this interdimensional consciousness, and primarily the Arcturian consciousness. So describe for those who don't know you how you went from that very conservative background into something just totally opposite. Because you kind of did a 180 there, right?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting story. People have asked me to write it down a bit, and maybe that'll come in the future. But just as like a roadmap, because I think a lot of the young people, maybe in high school, maybe even earlier, definitely in college, they're I think what they're looking at is, like you said, a very traditional model that definitely is still in place. Kind of graduate from high school, go to 4 years of college, perhaps, and some people don't do that. But at least if you follow sort of some like academic or professional track. But I think now there's a lot more openings. People, maybe like both you and I and others on the call, have done very unique paths. So there's roadmaps out there for young people to actually go an alternate route, kind of create their own life far earlier than maybe what we had to do. Or at least what I had to do, or just in general. But so I think there is a shift, and that allows people, I think, more to come into their own natural gifts and powers that they can offer to the planet without having to follow a kind of a set role before they can actually blossom. But I know I didn't quite talk about my own path, but that seemed to be coming through. So.
No, that was really important to share, Gene, because we have such a wide spectrum of listeners, but there's a whole group that's in their 20s, Gene, that listen, that I hear from, and so a message like that coming from you means a lot, because a lot of them are guided and directed to this very traditional route of doing things and of education and all of that. So someone like you saying that, who went to Harvard and you went to Stanford, and to Yale, did you know back then did you have any inkling that this was coming?
No, I was thinking about what you were saying in the introduction and kind of what the thread might have been. I didn't consciously know that I would I guess be in holistic healing or healing, or even as, far out as what I'm currently doing with the Arcturian work. But the thing that I know were kind of intimate experiences since I was young was just this fascination and direct experience with the fluidity of consciousness. I do remember, like, when I was young, I could basically see the world out of almost like two perspectives. They weren't simultaneous, but like I could basically shift into another, almost like way of viewing the world. I would have to basically like do very interesting things, either like this when I'm 4 or 5. I would either have to like twirl around for a while or put myself upside down. But all of a sudden the world, like I was seeing the same thing, but out of a completely different consciousness perspective. And while I was at Stanford, I tried to research that while I was studying psychology. And I think I came close to finding something that, they had like studied that or identified, at least the term for it, which I don't remember right offhand. But it just made me recognize very viscerally that consciousness is very malleable, that the world is not exactly as we see it, although it can set into a very rigid or set way for a while. And I think things like spirituality, meditation, maybe, plant medicines, drumming or whatever it might be, running, sports, it shifts our consciousness enough that we realize that, things aren't as set. And maybe sometimes that's what we're seeking, is that change in perspective or awareness that comes from a very visceral level. So I think that was the thread throughout.
Well, what I love about someone like you, Gene, is for those who haven't really been exposed to this world of energy and consciousness and healing that many who listen to a show like this are familiar with, you really give credibility to a different community who may consider things like this when they wouldn't have otherwise. I love knowing that there are many people who will see this recording, whether it's on iTunes or YouTube, and when they realize that you've, right or wrong or good or bad, that you've been to Stanford and Yale, and that now this is your path, it opens it up for a whole new group of people who might have been pretty rigid in their thinking prior. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, exactly what you're saying, and I was inspired also by other people who had come before and who were simultaneously, I think, following their path. And kind of the one or two things that what you mentioned kind of brings up is that it was quite organic in the sense that I could see the traditional path was sort of already laid out. It was almost like a mental program or something that I was following mentally, like you do this step and then that step, a bit like a recipe. But with where things started to go and now kind of full steam ahead, it's been very organic in the sense that it comes from within. Usually the next steps, sometimes there's only one step that's revealed. It's much like how a plant would grow, I think. You only really are given the next one or two steps to do. So it's kind of like you're much more in the moment, or I'm much more in the moment, and listening, more silence than creating an idea of what needs to be done. So it's quite a different framework, and I think that's how it sort of unfolded for me.
Right. Well, it's fascinating to me that it continues to unfold and expand for you. And, because you're beyond a holistic healer. To me, you are this interdimensional liaison with, bringing through just frequencies and energies from an interdimensional perspective that it goes so far beyond holistic healing. So let's talk about your introduction into, or your connection with the Arcturians. For those who aren't familiar with the Arcturians, let's talk about who they are, and how you established your connection with them, and where it's come to.
Yeah, definitely. It's ongoing and growing, I think, as kind of like maybe I'm a fractal or a microcosm of my own personal connection with spiritual consciousness, or one of them being Arcturian, as well as the entire planet, or humanity in general is becoming more open to inner world connections, and also on a global level to the Arcturians, as well as other you might call star beings or interdimensional beings. Yeah, but just from my own personal journey, I do see them as like a consciousness or a spiritual consciousness, more so than as maybe a physical being. although they may show up physically. I'm kind of open to that, but I relate to them maybe how some people might relate to angelic beings or spiritual beings. They have a unique flavor. Other people before myself, or of course, had popularized or connected with the Arcturian. So there was some establishment of that. I don't think it was very widespread, even in the holistic or spiritual or New Age community. But even as long as I guess the person I would say who I know of was already aware of them, at least in the modern age, was the American psychic Edgar Cayce. Had talked a lot about Arcturians, or at least in a number of readings. And I didn't know this until I was kind of well into the Arcturian Healing Method. Someone had brought these readings up of Edgar Cayce, that he had said they were very advanced healers, helping the planet, and that many people on the planet had might be connected to them, maybe unconsciously or consciously, because they're like that particular area in space, and maybe you could think of it as astral space rather than necessarily physical space, is like a way station into this particular domain of incarnation, like our physical planet. So it's been established, and my own intuition was that I did feel at one point when I was in kind of the midst of training as a healer, like doing a lot of different healing modalities, that I got that intuition that I was connected to the Arcturians. And it happened very somewhat unconsciously, or not very directed. I just sort of heard a intuitive voice say that I was Arcturian, and I didn't even consciously know where I had heard that term. And some people who come to the class now, they do say that also, that they just get that word in their mind, or maybe someone says it and they just feel a very strong resonance. So it's a bit like waking up to something deeply embedded in our system, is kind of how I saw it or see it. But just to kind of wrap up this story, and there were probably parts we could unpack, but from that point on, it took about 7 or 8 years. I just kept it in mind, and as I was doing these different trainings, we're finding tools to more consciously connect with them, and in particular, and I still use this tool. I used shamanic journeying to kind of journey to that consciousness and receive more conscious awareness, instruction, information, interaction. So that's how it kind of unpacked for me.
Yeah, it's when you mentioned that, you just felt a resonance, and I think a lot of people find that on this show, and I know the last times you've been on here, I heard that from people. Maybe they heard the word Arcturian, and whether they had been familiar with it before, there was something about the frequencies that you brought through that they resonated very strongly. So I guess it's sort of an activation or a trigger of a remembrance or of that connection to that aspect of who we are. Is that how you would see it or describe it for those who feel that resonance?
Yeah. I mean, I can use a parallel experience in my life that I think would help, because these are very, what I would call subtle experiences, although very profound for us when they happen. But when I was at Stanford, I ended up taking my sophomore year an Introduction to Buddhism class, and he's now a very famous American Tibetan Buddhist teacher. His name is Alan Wallace, and he was a graduate student at the time who was invited to give a talk, and I was, an undergrad sitting in the class, and he happened to mention what's called the Bodhisattva vow, which is basically a vow that you would take in that tradition, that you'll always reincarnate to help people awaken or become enlightened. It's kind of this vow of service. And when he said that, I had never heard that. I grew up in a more Catholic Christian tradition. There was something like a faint echo or a faint memory, like really a far-off memory in my consciousness, like that was familiar, and I had taken that vow. So I was thinking, now understanding past lives, it was deeply embedded in my consciousness. But just by him mentioning it, there was some kind of really faint, that's how I would explain it, like a faint echo inside, deep inside my consciousness. So I think that's what these triggers are like, whatever it might be, maybe it's the word Arcturian or the exposure to the frequency. You feel this faint remembrance somewhere deep inside you.
Absolutely. And it's such a gift, and I feel like people who are drawn to these shows, different people are drawn more strongly to different ones and different speakers, and I think it's their soul guiding them, for that experience. And so let's talk a little bit more about working with the higher beings, the interdimensional consciousness. There have to be some challenges to that, I would imagine. What are some of the obstacles to working with the spirit world from your perspective?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the first thing, probably, and the big thing now is the trust piece. Mm-hmm. Because, coming, I think if we grow up here in the West or in a modern society, the traditional educational model, of course, doesn't necessarily acknowledge or, for the most part, unless you went to a very progressive school, like a Montessori or, maybe a Rudolf Steiner type school, the spirit world. So, in philosophy, they call it scientific materialism, meaning what's real is the physical dimension. Mm-hmm. So then when you get into, experiences that are more subtle aspects of altered states of consciousness, and then the big step is talking about maybe an independent consciousness outside of your own that might be influencing you. That's like almost a big no-no in science, or, like that just starts to enter into like a non-reality. Then, because we have that strong structure in place, it's hard to trust, maybe even on an unconscious level, even if the experiences are quite strong, the experience we had. And then secondarily, we don't have necessarily a community to support, those experiences. Although now, like with these types of events, and I think that's really been changing. But I think those are really the difficulties in trusting what you've experienced.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's one of the reasons I was led to create this show, is so that people feel that the experiences that they're having are real, and that they're valid, and that there are plenty of other people having them. And it helps us, really cultivate that sense of trust that you're talking about. When, I spend every day having conversations like this, and it's, it's so normal and familiar, and that's what we want more people to feel. And so I'm grateful that you're talking about it. So for someone like you, and you've been doing this for a long time now, when you are connecting, and with the intention of getting this information and support from these spiritual beings, do you have specific ways of doing that, or kind of go-to techniques for yourself that you've found that work really well?
Yeah. Since I mentioned it already, I'll just mention shamanic journeying. Of course, that is a little bit involved. Resources are out there very easily that people could, learn that, and then more in-depth training all the way to, very, very in-depth training, however far people want to go with that. But basically with shamanic journeying, the key here, I think, with all the techniques is you're altering your state of consciousness. So we have kind of like our normal state, which keeps us more glued or at least focused on the physical dimension. And whatever the technique is, whether it be meditation, journeying, contemplation, some use of, substances that, I know have become popular, you're basically altering your state of consciousness. And in that altered state, you're experiencing, these other dimensions, other realms that are non-physical, of course, and then other consciousness more easily. So just to kind of conclude with or just mention the shamanic journeying, the style that I learned was from Michael Harner, And basically it's like with acoustic percussion, some kind of monotonous drumming or toning that then changes your brain waves. This is a scientific way to look at it. But basically you alter your state of consciousness. And then what I do with my mind is I basically move it to a location in my mind that I know I can meet with the Arcturians. And in that altered state, it's much more easier to open up this channel of communication with them. And that's how I receive the information consciously.
So, Gene, when you're open up that channel of communication, are you aware pretty quickly of whether you're connecting with the Arcturians or another collective or group of beings? Is it clear to you?
Yeah. With the journeying, the way they teach it is like you usually imagine that you're going. Well, first you make a very clear intention about where you're going and like who you might want to meet. Like maybe it's your spirit guide or like the bear or something. So that intention is almost like the FM tuner on your radio. It kind of tunes you to the right station. And then you move, through a certain visualization to a location that you may have already established in your mind's eye, that you meet the particular spiritual being, if it's one that you've been meeting for a while. And then once you meet there, besides all those sort of safeguards, or I don't know if you want to call it that, or steps, there's always that discernment of how that being feels to you, that you kind of almost like imprint or recognize. So it's much like when your best friend emails you, within almost the first couple words, you can tell if it's from your friend or not. But if someone like hacked their email and then started to write you a letter, and you could tell it's not like it's not
the tone them, so. The tone's a little different. The feeling is different. Yes.
Yeah.
You mentioned discernment, and so as you were talking, for someone who is wanting to open up this channel of communication, whether it's with the Arcturians or any interdimensional beings of the light, angels, guides, collectives, whatever, do you promote or practice the use of protection, any kind of, and is there anything that you do for that, or do you just use discernment when you're there or when you're in the situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think it's an important question, and a number of spiritual teachers, authors, writers, meditators, yogis have written really good books on, you might call it spiritual discernment, spiritual protection, or spiritual boundaries, because you are, once you kind of start swimming in the ocean, so to speak, entering a very vast realm. Just to maybe condense some of the ideas, and then maybe I could give resources later. But one which I learned from, his name was Samuel Sagan, who started the Clairvision School, which I studied with, was he mentioned that as you build your clairvoyance or your vision, whether it be third eye meditations and so forth, so you begin to actually sense better. You can see better in the inner world, and that like you said is that in itself is a very high form of if you would want to call it protection, because now you can actually you can recognize if the vibration is the same or not, according to who you are intending to connect with. Of course, this takes time. That's a long-term solution. So maybe on a more short-term solution, if a person wanted just to have that assurance, I like the idea of an invocation before you do any type of practice. And so that would be, some people might not like the term or use the term God, but if you connect with the divine source, and if you do have connections with angelic beings like Archangel Michael in the Christian tradition, or simply just recognizing your own divinity or your higher self, that sort of brings in a very positive vibration into your consciousness. And then the idea in the inner world is like attracts like. So, in that way you resonate with the same type of spiritual consciousness when you do these types of explorations or practices. And just as a third note, just to finish that out, this is more just my opinion, but I think if you go slowly, like I think any type of technique that drives you very quickly or opens you up very quickly, the benefit, of course, is that you can achieve heights very fast, maybe things that you would take months for someone or even years for someone going more slowly. But sometimes there's like inner protection mechanisms that your system has, like that you're not even conscious of, much like we're not conscious of our innate immune system that protects us from, germs and so forth. Those sometimes are no longer in place if you go too quickly with certain techniques.
Right. And that leads, and I wanted to ask you, that leads me to ask you something I was going to ask you earlier. What is your take on the plant medicines and like ayahuasca and stuff like that? I mean, is that, it kind of goes along with what you just said. Does it, I mean, you kind of run the risk of going too fast, perhaps. I don't know. What's your take on it?
Yeah. I haven't tried it directly myself, so I guess I wouldn't be able to speak directly. I can mention some people who I've worked with who, I respect their experiences and can share one or 2 points, like with some teachers in shamanism. One of them mentioned who has explored various plant medicines, and even Michael Harner actually wrote a book. The scientific term is called entheogens. He started the Foundation for Shamanic Studies and wrote the book, The Way of the Shaman, just for people who might be familiar with those things. But one of the things that those compounds can do is basically it's like a helicopter. Like it can take you to the peak of Mount Everest really quickly, metaphorically. So it could show you maybe what close to the ultimate goal of, let's say, a meditative practice might bring you experientially, like maybe this experience of voidness or illumination or awakening, and then it kind of can bring you back down. And if you do that once or twice, this is what this teacher was telling me, that can then help if you have a more steady practice. You kind of know where you're going, so that might give you inspiration. The danger with there is maybe where it becomes a crutch, that's the only way to have any kind of spiritual experience. And I'm sure that the teachers who are responsibly doing the plant medicine, that's not the way they're guiding their students or their participants, but there's always that possibility.
Right. No, I appreciate your perspective on that, and I was curious if that was a part of your practice, and and it's not. And so I wanted to ask you also, as you're talking, I have a million questions that come up. When you were talking about opening that channel of communication in your journeying, or however you choose to do it, with the Arcturians, as we mentioned, this connection with them has evolved over the years. What is happening with them now that is different from perhaps last time you were on the show? How has it changed or evolved?
Yeah, well, one kind of big thing, and that may be also a change in my own development and opening, is, and I think that's it's a two-way kind of this communication, is that a more divine feminine aspect of the Arcturians is coming through for the Arcturian Healing Method, or like my connection with them. I had, I don't really see them as like beings in the way that we would see us in physical form. They're more almost like a consciousness, but they do have a certain flavor to them. And the ones that I had met, there was a masculine aspect, and I had met some feminine aspects of the Arcturians. But I think there was now a strong feminine component that wanted actually to be integrated as a transmission into the method. And I think that really balanced things out for the Arcturian Healing Method as a form of, as a healing form. So that kind of has evolved. And then The other piece, which isn't directly related only with the Arcturians, but since we talked, because you earmarked and helped me remember when our last live interview was in January, but in February I went to Switzerland, which I kind of go on a regular basis, and we did have this major physical sighting in the night sky of 7 what I call power-ups, and I think that now that I have been meditating on that, and this was seen by 5 of us, like a really significant, basically star, or almost like you'd call a UFO sighting in the sky. That I think has had a dramatic effect for myself, and then of course that interaction with the Arcturians. Although I don't think the Arcturian consciousness was behind that sighting.
Okay, I was just about to ask you that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any feeling as to who it was?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of unpacked it a bit in some of the frequencies, but I do feel they may be linked, with Orion. And Orion, of course, is a star, but the inner world aspect of that. And just on my own journeying, to the beings that might have been behind that experience, they just appeared to me like as golden lions, like that might just be the metaphoric form that encapsulates their consciousness. But they were quite distinct from the Arcturians, probably in resonance, of course. And I do think they're more linked with the Orion kind of constellation, or that astral aspect of the constellation.
Did they share that there was a purpose or a message to be relayed because of that experience?
Yeah, I think a lot of what they were doing, so just to kind of describe what happened, the thing, it was so distinct. We were on this very powerful mountain called the Matterhorn. I think people may be familiar with that, on the Toblerone candy. It's that big mountain. And that was the only thing we saw that evening. I mean, it was very dark, very clear, and these 7 power-ups in the night sky, like at the star level. And I think what they're trying to let, I guess, me and other people know is that this interdimensional contact, that there really are, it doesn't have to be only one group, like you may be connected, has nothing to do with the Arcturians, but you might be connected to angels. But because of this acceleration on the planet and our own personal acceleration, that they're really waiting to help, but they can only help if we make that connection, and that we're sort of open to that. So they could only wait until we acknowledge their presence and actually ask for like a co-creation. So the way just to end that, just the way I kind of see it is like if we happen to pass from our physical body, or when we do, and then we're on the inner world and we see like our good friend doing their thing, but really they're kind of just listening to their Walkman kind of thing. They would never kind of acknowledge our presence, because for the most part, a lot of people don't believe in the spirit world. There's nothing we can do. Maybe we can show up in their dreams as maybe a thought impulse, but it's very hard to really work deeply from the other side unless there's some acknowledgement, and also a choice to work, like a free will choice.
So have you developed more of a connection with this Orion collective or this group since then?
Yeah, well, for when the initial couple of months, I did kind of put together something like a frequency package, just to, I think they did have that to like transmit those. Basically, like when I studied with Stephen Greer, who's kind of well known in the UFO field, and actually taught me a lot of these techniques of contact. He said when those power-ups occur, there's a tremendous amount of information, like energetic information, being projected into like the group circle that might be making the connection. So I tried to unpack it in that way, and did a series of transmissions. But since then, it's been kind of back more with the Arcturian work. So I haven't connected so much, or they're probably just there also in the background, sort of support team, so to speak.
Yes. I would imagine you have many support teams, Gene. And I love your phrasing. You know, two of your popular phrases are and I hadn't heard this, the power-ups. So is that just another word for a spacecraft?
Well, the way it looks is kind of the way the wording is. And so it looks like a star. Mm-hmm. It can be moving, or it could just be stationary. And then I usually, particularly if you have like an astronomy laser, like these powerful lasers, when you're doing these contact sightings, you'll circle something like that, particularly if it's moving. It kind of looks like a satellite moving. And then when you circle it, it basically blows up. It gets like super bright. It can maybe even, get 10 times or more brighter, and then it kind of comes back down. And satellites don't do that. And what's really significant is if you're in a dark patch of sky, and then all of a sudden that happens. Like there's nothing even moving, and all of a sudden like this thing just blows up, like a big star and then it goes back to darkness.
Right.
And that basically happened 7 times within like 3 or 5 minutes. So that was quite significant.
Yes, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then you say unpack, which is, I love that,
mm-hmm.
because there's so much that goes on so many different layers when you experience something like that. And then, as I mentioned to you before the show, you have these experiences all over. I mean, you're in Mount Shasta. I'm not sure how often, but you actually live close to there, I believe, right? Are you?
I'm actually in southern, near Los Angeles, and then
okay.
Mount Shasta is kind of at the border of
sure.
Oregon. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you experienced that there as well, because as I mentioned to you, a speaker who was on the show was actually with you in a group in Shasta, and this was just a few months ago, and had some of the most profound experiences there with you. So it's pretty commonplace for you to have these power-up experiences.
Exactly.
Well, and what's fascinating is there's so much that is going on. There's a transference of energy, of information, right, during these experiences that I guess the mind can't really understand, but it's something that I would imagine you bring into your work and with the frequencies that you deliver, moving forward. Let's talk about the frequencies that, and for the Arcturian Healing Method, you bring through these frequencies that are powerfully healing. And we're going to take some callers, and there's lots of people who've written in on the webcast, because describe how you do this. People bring up a specific concern, issue, something that needs to be healed, and describe what happens, what you do with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so someone might call in and say, I'm kind of working, maybe I have a liver issue. My doctor mentioned that, maybe I need to work on that. And then I'll just kind of tune in intuitively. Usually even while they're talking, I get the sense of the different arrays of Arcturian Healing Method frequencies, which one or two might be appropriate, maybe sometimes up to 3. And then I'll just channel that both specifically for that person, but then also the entire group, both live, as well as the intention is anyone who would be listening to the recording is also going to receive that frequency. And of course, it doesn't have to be specific or work the same way it's working for the person who requested it. It has its own intelligence, so it will work with people, whatever their intention might be. Also, you could keep it open and just let the intelligence, this divine intelligence and your own innate intelligence guide where the frequency will be. It's usually like 2-3 minutes of 4 of exposures to the frequencies.
Yes, and for those who haven't experienced it before, Is it a verbal sound, a tone? Is it
Mm-hmm.
silence? What can they anticipate?
Yeah. I usually will hear me sort of say I'm starting this frequency, like maybe it's Arcturian dimensional bridge healing frequency, and then for the most part I'm silent. And it really doesn't have to do with the recorded sound or tone on the physical dimension. It's as if it's like I'm doing a distance healing. So the energies are coming in at the subtle level, like starting from the pranic or etheric level on higher to the astral. So it's more an energy transfer, and we're just using the recording or the sound of my voice just as a way to connect your consciousness to the subtle energy. Mm-hmm.
So would someone have to actually feel it to have it be effective and work on them?
Yeah. No, the answer is no. And kind of a slightly more in-depth answer is you can transmit energies, and that's kind of like you can move energies, and energies can move through you, and they call that something the kinetic ether, kinetic meaning movement. And then there's something called the sensate ether, which is your ability to sense that energy that's moving through you. And they're actually two different skills. So someone might not be able to feel energies, but there might still be quite a lot of energy moving through them. So you don't have to be able to feel the energies if they're, and they'll still be working on you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going to take some callers, but I want to emphasize what is in part of your package and what we're also going to do today, and that is incorporating the 5 elements, which is something that you are focusing on now in your healing practice. Do you want to talk about that now, or do you want to take some callers first? What feels best to you, Gene?
I could talk about the 5 elements. Did you want me to kind of explore the package a little bit now, or?
Yeah, let's do that. And everyone who's on the line, we are going to take some callers. We're going to do some of the healing requests, of course. But Gene has created, every time he's here, he creates something new. And these are really unique packages. So you have incorporated the 5 elements. So talk about what you created and why that's important and why you felt, the significance of incorporating the elements into the healing. Talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've had a lot of influence using this framework of health and healing, predominantly from actually this shamanic training that I took. People who've been in the holistic fields, particularly some of the Eastern fields, and I'm sure there's also, there definitely also is an esoteric Western field, probably also North and South traditions that recognize the different elements. And the elements, in this case, build up particularly our physical and etheric bodies. So the framework that I've been using here and that you'll see in the package is the one that's earth, water, fire, air, and sometimes they add a 5th one, which I've added. They sometimes call it space or ether. And the Western tradition also has that. If people, I mentioned Rudolf Steiner, has studied Rudolf Steiner. He also presents that. So these are also etheric energies. But I felt very drawn to this, particularly in my shamanic training, because in shamanism, which works with spirits, these, for healing, these elements are actually spiritual beings also. So you can have a spirit of earth, spirit of water, spirit of fire, spirit of air, spirit of space. And in this 3-year training that I had, which is their most in-depth training, they actually introduced this use of the spirits of these elements at the very last training session, which signifies, just by the way the curriculum is set up, how advanced it was to actually use these particular forces. So I, both intuitively as well as just experientially and educationally, I realized there's probably a lot here and powerful things to explore for healing. And just one last note in general. So when your elements are balanced in your system, particularly for your physical health, you don't notice your body, meaning it's in perfect balance. Like, it's only really when we're a little bit off that we start to, recognize or notice some aspect of our body. So the goal, the idea is that we'd be in dynamic balance with these 5 elements. So this has been unpacked. This is like completely new. Haven't used these before in a public setting. It came out of also a use of the 5 platonic solids, but it's with the Arcturians, but it's a really separate set of frequencies. And basically, it's the Arcturian version of these 5 frequencies. And I'll just kind of give a general overview, and if you have any questions, maybe to unpack some of it. But basically, within the first 3 sessions that you get in the package, the first 2 you would be exposed to the Arcturian earth element and water element healing frequency. So that would balance those elements in your body. Then the fire and the air element, the Arcturian version in session 2. And then in session 3, it's this Arcturian space healing frequency, and then all 5 together. So this is really for any kind of healing intention. You were basically taking this lens and balancing and bringing health to whatever healing intention you might bring, but using the elements to do that.
I love it. Well, I love that you always bring something new, because those the people who follow you, they get so excited when there's something new. And for those who haven't, who are new to you, I want to emphasize that this is about helping restore balance and longevity to the system, youthfulness. It's all of that. And these are 5 pre-recorded MP3s that people can listen to right away. They'll get immediate access to them. The first 3 are 45 minutes each, and then there's a 45-minute meditation, and then there's a 10-minute MP3 for a quick recharge of the 5 elements in the body. So thank you for bringing something new always, and that's exciting. That's exciting. Thank you for bringing. I wanted to bring that up because that's the unique part of what you're bringing to the show today. We're always talking about the Arcturian Healing Method, but we always bring in a little something new. So thank you, Gene, for creating that. And let's go ahead and take some callers. Then we have lots of people who've written in. For the people who've written in from the webcast, Gene, are you I guess whatever, I'm going to try to select a couple things that might benefit the most people. Okay, is that what you feel is best in that situation? Because I'm looking at some things. Yeah. There's some general themes here, but then there's some very unique things as well. Let me go ahead and we'll go to the phone lines first and see what comes up. And the hands just like went flying up. Okay, for those who don't know, press *2 to raise your hand to be considered for this. And Gene, for the callers, just have them just whatever healing request that they have, just mention what that is. Do you need their name or location, anything like that?
Oh, no. I mean, if they mention their name, that's great.
Okay.
But no, yeah, it's enough. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So we can get through some of these, as many of these as we can. If you can just be relatively brief in describing what's going on, that way we can let Gene do his thing. So, okay, I'm going to our first caller, and your area code is 310. 310. Although,
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Thank you. I've been better. I'm so thrilled that you took my call because I'm just scratching my head over here going, I don't know what to do next. I've been on and off chronically ill with chronic fatigue, and I'm guessing it's related to the Epstein-Barr virus, and I have episodes where I'm better and then where I'm not better. But then recently I've just been getting worse, and I'm sorry this is complicated. I'm concerned about my kidneys because on top of all that, I've had experiences where my kidneys have been compromised because of different herbal supplements that I've taken. And so I guess my question is if you could take a peek and see if whatever I'm dealing with has more to do with the herbs I'm taking, or if it's just good old-fashioned chronic fatigue.
Yeah. Well, usually how I work is we can. There were 2 frequencies in particular in the Arcturian Healing Method. I think that could help or balance the situation that you presented. One is called the Arcturian repatterning of cells. It works on a cellular and DNA level. And then the other one is called Arcturian blueprint activation. And it connects you more with your divine source or divine blueprint, and then allows that to kind of come through more strongly. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it possible to ask what your intuitive hit is on? I mean, because I don't know. Do I need to go get like a blood test or a kidney exam? Or, I mean, I really try to stay away from those kind of doctory things because they usually it's a joke. But do you have a sense of what's making me acutely ill?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, in general, I don't do like medical readings per se.
Right. Okay, that's fine. I understand.
Yeah, I would allow the frequencies to come through and see if you feel something, and maybe come back and listen again. What is your name? I may have missed it if you said it. What was your name?
It's Emily.
Hi, Emily. And just see how that feels. And because what I've noticed is people who've been with us before on these calls with Gene, you may feel it, and then your questions will be kind of null and void. So maybe just open up and see what we can do here. How about that? Are you open to that, Emily?
Of course.
Okay.
I was hoping for something more specific, but if that's not available, then whatever you can offer, I'm grateful.
Okay. Yeah, the way Gene works is he brings through these frequencies, these Arcturian healing frequencies, and they will benefit you, ideally, and the entire group. So let's let him do his magic. I'm going to let you let you do your thing, Gene.
Okay, great. All right. So we're going to channel these 2 frequencies, and there also might be insight that will come also, directly for Emily, as well as for others, and that usually just unpacks within, and that can happen anytime, instantly or within the next couple of days or even weeks.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So we're starting with the Arcturian repatterning of cells, both specifically for Emily's request as well as for everyone on the call, including people listening to the recording. And this works on the cellular and DNA level. We're doing that now. And while this is channeling, I'm usually silent, and that's just to let the energies work. But every so often, if it's more prolonged, I'll just chime back in just so people know that I'm still here. Now we're starting the Arcturian blueprint activation, which aligns you more with your divine self, your highest blueprint of information, so that can come through more clearly on an ongoing basis. Okay, great. And the frequencies ended there. So we'll bring the session to a close.
Okay, thank you, Gene. And Emily, I don't know if you felt anything, or if you will as the day progresses or the week progresses. But yeah, how are you feeling?
I'm okay.
Okay. Yeah, just stay open to it. This is yeah, you're welcome, sweetie. And we'll see. Let me know how you're doing.
Okay.
This is far more powerful than you may realize, and it may take a minute to be realized. But I thank you, Emily, for your question and for being with us, okay?
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Emily. Okay. So, Gene, I guess it would affect everyone uniquely and differently. If someone is new to you and your work, Gene, what do you suggest for people to help them open up to these healing frequencies?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you just allow things to happen. I mean, it's tough when you're going through something. Of course, you want that, particularly if it's painful. You want that to be resolved. But if you can kind of just slightly open that door where you're open to just seeing what's possible. I think you started out with a statement like that, which I loved in the beginning of the talk. See what's possible. That kind of consciousness of kind of almost being okay with whatever shows up. That really puts you in a great state for the frequencies to manifest in a way that you can recognize them.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, let me get back to my phone screen. Okay, we're going to go to another caller, and let's see. Okay, I'm going to area code 250. 250.
Hello?
Hi, welcome to the call.
Oh, I was just listening. The last caller was actually really helpful to me because it's I have a torn ACL in my left knee, and wanting healing for that, and taking the next step in my life. And
what is your name?
Marianne.
Okay, Marianne. So, Jean, perhaps some healing for her knee and perhaps just physical healing, or what are you sensing is best here?
Yeah, there's a particular frequency, pretty advanced one in the method, at least, called the Metatron Melchizedek Arcturian Mandala Healing Frequency. I think we'll, if Marianne's open to that, we can channel that for her torn left ACL, as well as, kind of taking the next steps, like she said.
Okay, how does that sound, Marianne?
Wonderful, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're starting now. So we're starting with Metatron Melchizedek Arcturian Mandala Healing Frequency for the group as well as for Marianne's request. Continuing to channel the Metatron Melchizedek Arcturian Mandala Healing Frequency. Okay, great. And that ended there.
Beautiful.
We can bring the session to a close. Mm-hmm.
Marianne, thank you for that. I have some challenges with my knee as well, so that was very that was very helpful for me too. So how are you feeling, Marianne?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you to all that helped.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you to Gene and everybody, all the beings. All right, Marianne, please take care of yourself, and I hope your knee feels better, and hope this has been helpful for you.
Thanks, Gene.
Okay.
Oh, thanks, Marianne.
Okay. Gene, I want to go to the webcast because there have been people who've been writing in since way before the call started. Lots of people here. Okay. Karuna from California. Can I receive a healing from my throat chakra? And can I be opened for a connection with my star family? So those are two different things, but I feel like a lot of people could benefit from both. So what are you sensing is best for that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a series that's actually in the level 5 of the method. It's a combination of Arcturian and the Archangel Metatron. They're called Arcturian Metatron device frequencies. And so we'll channel 2 for the group, and of course for Karuna's request for the throat opening, the throat center, or healing the throat center and chakra, as well as an awareness of the star connection and family. That's usually held in the Akashic records. So you'll hear me mention the frequency that works to help with opening the star connection.
Okay.
Okay. So we're beginning now. So we're utilizing the Arcturian Metatron etheric device for psychic surgery, both for Karuna's request as well as for the entire group. Continuing to utilize the Arcturian Metatron etheric device for psychic surgery. And now we're shifting to the Arcturian Metatron spiritual device for accessing the Akashic record readings and energy. Continue with the Arcturian Metatron spiritual device for the Akashic record information and energy. Okay. And that ended there. That brings the short session to a close.
Beautiful. Thank you. And Karuna,
Yeah.
I hope that you received that. And I also hope that Debbie, who wrote a beautiful message in there, but she was also asking about connecting more with the celestial beings, and I believe that was sort of incorporated into what you just did with the Akashic Records and with Karuna's request for connecting with the star families, right? So, Debbie, that was for you too. And okay, so Liako from New York City. Hi, Liako. She says, love you both. Love you too, Liako. She is wanting to know if you could include the cash flow and physical body pain in the frequencies today. What do you use for that, for cash flow?
Cash flow, yeah, that's great.
Okay. I'm sure everyone's like, yes, bring that one on. Okay. Liako, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there actually is a frequency that's geared more for physical prosperity, flourishing on the physical as well as all levels. It's called the Arcturian Golden Naga Earth Regenerative Energy. So we'll channel that. And then also for the physical body pain, we'll also move to the Arcturian Dimensional Bridge Healing Frequency.
Okay.
We're channeling the Arcturian Golden Naga Earth Regenerative Energy for prosperity. Now we're channeling the Arcturian Dimensional Bridge Healing Frequency for the pain that Liako mentioned in your body, and also in general for whatever each person's intention is. Continuing to channel the Arcturian Dimensional Bridge Healing Frequency. Great. And that brings the session to a close.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Gene, what do you experience on your end while doing that?
Yeah, so I'm, turning on the frequencies in certain chakras in my system, particularly above and below my body. This is the energetic mechanism. And then I'm usually pretty still, and I definitely feel like I'm jacked in. Like it takes like a certain amount of focus, and even I wouldn't call it's a combination of physical and energetic strain or strength to, like, you can feel like you have to kind of hold something.
Yes. Yes, I would imagine. Good job. Great job, Gene. Karuna wrote back in, by the way, and said, thank you. Thank you so much, you both. I had tingling in my crown. Thank you so much. Much love and gratitude to both of you. Wonderful, Karuna. And Liako, hopefully you were there for what we just did. Gene, I'm kind of combining a few things in the webcast. Is there a frequency for fine-tuning or sharpening the inner vision and perhaps the clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, so that we can just fine-tune and sharpen those things?
Yeah. There's the frequencies, at least for the training purposes, they come out in certain levels. So there's a 7th level that hasn't actually physically come out as a training, but I've been using those frequencies. And there's a series called the upper echelon frequencies they're used to increase the overall vibration or clarity of our system. So that would work perfectly for this clairvoyance increase. So we'll utilize that. In fact, there's a frequency for increasing higher clairvoyance, so we'll kind of use that in particular also. Okay, beautiful. I'm excited about that. Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, so we'll start with what I call the upper echelon, called Arcturian upper echelon frequency. So we're starting with the Arcturian upper echelon number 6 frequency, both for the specific request as well as in general, whatever your specific request would be. And now we're utilizing the Arcturian higher clairvoyance frequency. Continuing with a few more minutes of the Arcturian higher clairvoyance frequency. Great.
Wow.
And that completes that session.
Mm-hmm. That was a powerful one for me. It was like all my senses were heightened. There were all these, the scents in the air just like, and then the flashes of light in my inner vision as my eyes were closed. So that was awesome. Liako says, I know I have Arcturian in my DNA. It feels so natural to me. And she says, thank you. She was all smiles after before. Yeah, this is really resonating with a lot of people, as it typically does when you come on the show. What I want to emphasize, Gene, for those who might be new, and these are subtle frequencies, right? What I have found with your work is oftentimes when I listen, especially when I listen to the recordings that, like you offer in your package, it opens me up more. It's kind of like it triggers things inside of me that maybe I don't feel in the moment. And then when I go into meditation or do something like that, it's like all these new things start happening. Is that normal? That's been my experience anyway. I'm just feeling like for someone who may be new to them, and these are very subtle at first. I want people to feel like that's okay, and it may come later. What do you say to that, Gene?
Yeah. Sometimes when something is much more on the etheric body, it feels like a pressure or a sensation, like on a chi level, and so those are the feeler kind of experiences. In the other subtle bodies, like the astral, causal, which is your karmic body, your spiritual body, and then like even the divine body, there may not necessarily be a corresponding sensation, but you're being these frequencies or an exposure to something like this would be a transfer of a tremendous amount of information, like in a packed form, and then it unpacks over time in your life. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's where that phrase, yes, that describes it so perfectly. It really does, because it's like all of this information that comes in, and over a period of time, especially if you practice meditation or something like that, in whatever form, it is unpacked and unraveled pretty beautifully and magically. So, yay. Thank you for that, Gene, just for describing that. Someone asked a question earlier, Gene, and I think they just want to know your perspective. It's not about healing, but and you had said something earlier about, and it was earlier in the call, what is your perspective, Gene, about when one crosses over into the spirit world? What is your perspective on what happens? I realize this is a bit of a shift from what we just did, but I know we'd all appreciate your perspective on that.
Oh, yeah. In fact, it's been an interest of mine. Like once a year, I do have a class on death, dying, and the beyond is kind of the title. And, it's always been an interest just in terms of the consciousness and spirituality, and the shamanic work was always, had a lot of shamanic death initiations. But I do think, we do survive. Our consciousness survives. Of course, we shed the physical form. Things that allow us to bring stability to our consciousness now will benefit at that time, particularly at the transition, and then also, like the person mentioned, on the other side, or when we're more just in a fluid consciousness form. Because at least from studying some things in my own personal experience with deep meditations and so forth, that kind of maybe were similar to some of the death state consciousness. It's very fluid. So as people get more familiar with those different states, whether it be through shamanic journeying or meditation or whatever your practice might be, where you can kind of maybe be at home with these altered states of consciousness. That's kind of what we'll be in without the physical body. So when you have that more familiarity, there'll be, less fear or less anxiety, and then kind of an ease on the other side.
Do you feel it's a unique experience for everyone in terms of what happens for them after they transition, in terms of what they do next, where they go, things like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would kind of espouse that idea that people, will have a unique experience, and the more sort of we are aware now of our inner life, the more choice we have, particularly like in those situations, like at the death transition and then afterwards.
Right.
So it's like the less we stay unconscious, or the more conscious we can be. Those periods are really will benefit those periods a lot.
It's kind of like lucid dreaming here and now, but
no, yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Having direction, the capacity to direct the experience, in that state as well. What is your take on dimensions? And do the Arcturians, do they reside, and I'm using that word loosely, in a specific dimension?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I am slightly familiar with some frameworks of where, like dimensional frameworks, and I use one. I've been kind of loosely talking about like the 7-dimensional model. It's more just the different subtle body sheaths that we have, but they're also considered dimensions. But I'm very loose with the categorization. So like, I haven't really pinned down or even asked the Arcturians like what exactly dimension you reside in, like to give a number or something of that nature. But maybe more a feel. You could even say it's maybe even a more a feminine approach. It's more fluid. It's sort of like I feel them in a certain space of consciousness, and I haven't really categorized it so much. But I can see how that categorization may be helpful, almost like a map, to at least, kind of when you're in more of this dimensional state of consciousness, to kind of put things together for oneself or for others when you're presented in the physical realm. But I think it's my sense when I'm in the altered state is it's much more fluid and a feeling.
Yes. I feel that way too. And so when you hear people in our community or these communities of healing and spiritual evolution and expansion speaking about the shift from, on our planet from 3D to 5D, does that resonate with you? I mean, using the terms 3D, 5D, what is your take on that?
Yeah, usually, like I'm open to that, having come from maybe like some of the science frameworks. The only thing I usually like to hear is how they're defining, what fifth dimension means to them, and then I get more of a sense what they're talking about. And for example, sometimes I feel what they when someone has said that and then they've explained it, and I go, oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So maybe fifth dimension is less physical, like a more non-physical realm. So I just like to know what they mean by the terms, and that helps me out to embody what they're saying.
Right. So when you're in connection with the Arcturians or some of the other light beings, and is there ever any information that is shared on those subjects about dimension and the shift in consciousness or anything like that, or is it more about healing?
Yeah. I think it's kind of, it might be my filter of my consciousness, because like I'm asking them I usually come with a certain intention and question. So it's almost like it filters what information I can become conscious of when I'm in the interaction, which is helpful practically, so because I could be receiving so much at once, it would be undecipherable initially. But so like maybe if I came to them with a question more on what the topic we're talking about, I could receive more information directly on that, which I haven't done as much. Yeah, so I've been focusing a little bit more on like the healing modality, or like what tools for healing.
Which I'm super grateful for, and that's what's so fascinating and beautiful about everybody has their focus, you know, and I love that you described it that way, because if you didn't focus your intentions in a specific way, you'd probably be just overloaded with all kinds of information. So at least in this way, you're able to kind of laser focus into this arena of healing, which you do so well. So Gene, for those who are considering taking this further with this special offer, what do you recommend with these audios? Do you recommend listening to them in an order, or every day, or what do you find is most beneficial for people?
Yeah, so I would start with session 1 and do that for one day. This is just my recommendation. You can always follow your inner intuition and guidance. At least the first listen, maybe give a day between session 1, 2, 3, and then you could then do session 4 on day 4. That's more an active meditation where you're actually bringing in the different elements into a unique chakra for each element. So this is a much more dynamic, active practice. So if you wanted to actually, do something actively, that's what session 4 is about. So it's a bit more like a self-healing, actually meditation. And then session 5 can be used at any point within that first listen. What that is like it's kind of a quantum resonance tuner for efficiency. So you can kind of basically get the download in 10 minutes from, rather than having to listen to 3 sessions, so 45 minutes. But it's good to have gone through the long version at least once thoroughly.
Right.
And then just to finish that off, and then at that point, after you've gone through it once, you could do a session, like session 1 through 4. You can do those multiple times a day if you want, just as your guidance guides you.
So do you listen to your own MP3s?
Sometimes, sometimes I just do it right on myself. Because I
you kind of have direct a direct pathway there. You probably create so many, Gene, that because it just keeps coming. It's like there's more and more and more. But I'm excited about this new grouping of MP3s, and I love the session 5, the 10-minute supercharger, and because that is beautiful to listen to before bed too, and to sleep better. And this is, of course, I want to reemphasize, just geared toward physical, just longevity and balance and youthfulness, and that would be beneficial for a lot of people who wrote in who are experiencing physical pain, Gene, and also a lot of people who are experiencing a lack of energy. There were quite a few people who wrote in who said, I just feel drained, I'm tired, no energy, and dizzy. I think we did kind of cover that with one of the callers, I believe, right? The low energy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But this will take it further. the package recordings. Why do you think it is, Gene, that so many people are feeling that lack of energy right now? Do you have any feeling why that's so common for so many people, especially in our community?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things, like from the energy point of view that might not be obvious, but there's really an increase in the astral, which is the emotional, mental layer, both environmentally as well as within ourselves, and because of that, the astral body, it uses the etheric energy, like our prana. Mm-hmm. So, and particularly if you're sensitive to, or you're doing a lot of inner astral work, so it's like your fuel. And so because of that, we can get quite de-energized just from daily living, as well as the specific maybe practices or energy work that we're doing. So the key is to then be able to recharge your pranic body. We do that naturally through sleep and through eating, but that's why like breathing, particularly certain pranayama breathing, can really help that supercharging of the etheric body, kind of like fill up the gas tank faster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for that. And because just a lot of people have been writing in about that. And to sort of, we're going to start wrapping up here, Gene, but I want to leave people who are really interested in working with the Arcturians specifically. Gene, if they want to work with them in their life, their meditations or their healings as they move forward from this call today, what would you suggest?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, they are very available, like I mentioned, probably more available than we realize, as well as other higher angelic beings. The thing is, I was mentioning there is that obstacle of just recognizing the spirit world and then agreeing or asking for what I call a co-creation or working together. Mm-hmm. So the way practically that would work is whether you do some type of contemplative practice or you do your own self-healing or, before your meditation, you can simply make the intention to connect Arcturian. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. All right. My headset just I lost that. Now I'm speaking.
You're still with us. Oh.
Yeah, my etheric, I went to the second etheric. But so I was just finishing. So you make that intention, maybe in the invocation, and then just be still. And you will probably start to feel a frequency or a vibration. And this is something that you would discern over time. Sometimes it's strong enough that people will recognize it the first time. But then over time, like I mentioned about your friend who you know by email, you'll know when they've come. But they've come because you specifically asked in that beginning phase. And then you can start to receive, exchange or information.
Thank you, because a lot of people have been writing in, they really do feel this resonance with the Arcturians, and they wanted to know how to connect. I'm going to ask one more question of you, and then we'll wrap up. Alexandra wrote in, and she's wondering, how is this different? And I'm assuming she's meaning the Arcturian Healing Method, or what's in the package. How is it different from the dragon or the golden lion healings?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are other packages, but that's a good question.
Okay.
Yeah. The Arcturian dragon healing, those are like, there are a form of the Arcturians that showed up to me as dragons, and those are very powerful frequencies. Mm-hmm. They are different than these Arcturian, I call them 5-element frequencies, which are, the framework is more the elements, which are also could be considered spiritual beings, but they're just like a separate framework, so they are separate frequencies. This, like you had mentioned, is geared predominantly, if you have a physical or energetic healing issue, but there are also the elements on your more subtle bodies, such as your emotional, mental, causal, and spiritual bodies. So it can go like into a deeper, more spiritual aspect of the elements. That's also part of these frequencies. Mm-hmm. The golden line frequencies, it's actually what I mentioned about the sighting in Vermont, Switzerland. Yeah, mm-hmm. So that's kind of different. It's non-Arcturian, but that's also like a different set of frequencies.
Right. So these are new and unique. Gene hasn't offered these before. So for those of you who follow his work and you're wanting something new, this is it. And Liako, she wrote back in. She said that I use Gene's MP3 every day. Sometimes just run to fill my room with high vibe. It's so good. Good. Yeah, that's awesome to hear. And okay, Gene, it's always a pleasure to have you here and just kind of see how things have evolved and what's happening and all the new frequencies. So thank you so much just for your time and just for sharing, all that you do with us. And there's a lot of gratitude in the webcast for you too. So I want to pass that along. So thank you, Gene.
Oh, thanks, Carrie. It was great to have the conversation. I love the topics we talked about, some really kind of new and innovative ones, and sharing the frequencies, and can feel everyone's presence and love. And so thank you, everyone, for the connection.
Yes. Okay, Gene. Well, I'm sure that I'll have you back for some more fun sometime soon. So thanks to you and thanks to everybody for the gift of your light, your presence, your love, your time today. If you've joined us by computer, we welcome your comments and feedback from today's show. Just send it on over and I will be checking for it. I am sending waves and waves of love and light and gratitude from my heart to yours. May you feel it, receive it, and offer it to those you encounter today or tonight, wherever you are in the world. And please join us in our Facebook group if inspired. We'd love to see you there. And until next time, please give yourself full permission to shine instead of shrink, express instead of suppress, and own that amazing, powerful glow of yours. I'll see you back here next time, everybody. Bye-bye.